Good day, everyone. My name is Precious Kate Spanner, together with my groupmates Gina May Mapiot and Christine May Sabaliana. Today, we're going to talk about the pivotal social program that aimed to reshape the Philippines' agricultural landscape, the post-1986 agrarian reform. After the fall of Marcos in 1986, President Corazon Aquino made this reform a cornerstone of her administration, but as well see its promise of land equality face theft. The reform kicked off in July 1987 when Aquino issued Presidential Proclamation 131 and Executive Order 229, laying out the framework for a land redistribution. A year later, Congress passed the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, or RA 6657, which launched the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform, better known as CARP. Under CARP, agricultural lands were to be given to tenants and farmers, with landowners getting government compensation. Landowners could keep up to 5 hectares, and corporate landowners had the option to give beneficiaries stock or equality instead of actual land. Despite its goals, CARP struggled under Aquino. In 6 years, only 22.5% of targeted land was distributed. Why? Because Congress, dominated by the landed elite, refused to allocate enough funds for the high compensation cost. The program also sparked controversy. Aquino was accused of favoring her relatives, the famous Hacienda Luisita, owned by her family, used to stock redistribution option instead of giving land to farmers, a move that left many beneficiaries without actual ownership. When President Ramos took office, he tried to speed up implementation to hit CARP's 10-year deadline. By 1996, only 58.25% of the target area was distributed, still far from the goal. To fix funding in time issues, Ramos signed RA 8532 in 1998, extending the program from another decade. So, the post-1986 agrarian reform was a bold attempt to address centuries of land inequality. It had clear progressive legislation, but political power, funding shortages, and loopholes held it back from full success. Its legacy continues to shape debates about land rights and social justice in the Philippines today.
CARP and the future of agrarian reform in the Philippines. When CARP expired, there were still 12 million farmers waiting for land and around 1.6 million hectares still not disturbed. This means that the program failed to meet its target on time. CARP Law RA 9700-2009, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo signed a new law called CARP Extension with Reform. It extended CARP for more 5 years to continue land contribution. This improved the process. Section 30 of CARP says that any agrarian cases still unresolved by June 30, 2014 can continue even beyond the deadline. This shows the government recognized that the process was slow and needed flexibility so farmers' cases would not be abandoned. From 2009 to 2014, CARP was able to distribute 1 million hectares of land around 9,000 farmers. This shows progress but still not enough to complete the reform. The remaining undistributed land, despite 27 years of agrarian reform, there are still around 5,000 hectares undistributed. This highlights how slow and challenging the process has been. Agencies responsible: DAR and DENR. The DAR handles private agricultural lands, and the DENR handles public and forest lands. They are the main implements of CARP and CARPer. The struggle of both agencies. Even though the two major agencies working together, agrarian reform is still not finished. This shows administrative weakness and difficulty in executing the law. Powerful landowners' resistance. Wealthy landowners have money, political power, and influence, which they use to delay or block land contribution. This is one of the biggest reasons agrarian reform is slow in the Philippines. Government efficiency and bureaucracy, weak systems, slow processing, corruption, and complicated procedures make the agrarian reform process drag for years. Agency lacks resources, staff, and political will. Indonesia and lasting problems. These long-standing issues continue to prevent the country from achieving genuine agrarian reform. Farmers' unfulfilled hope. Many Filipino farmers still don't have their own land even after decades of fighting and the passage of several laws. This shows the gap between the promises of the government and the reality of farmers.
Evolution of Philippine taxation. Taxation is a reality that all citizens need to deal with. Governments collect taxes so they can function properly and provide services to the people. In exchange, the government is expected to improve our lives through good governance. Here in the Philippines, our tax system developed over time and much of it was influenced by our colonial experience.
Taxation in the Spanish Philippines. Long before the Spaniards arrived, our ancestors had systems of giving tributes to datus, but this was nothing like the taxation we know today. When the Spanish colonizers set foot in the Philippines, they transformed our subsistence economy by imposing new taxes that would fund the rule and shape our country's economic path for centuries. Let's dive into how that happened. Spanish early colonial taxation. Before colonization, most Filipinos lived off what they grew. A subsistence economy, the buhis or handog they give to datus was more about community obligations than formal taxation. But the Spaniards changed that by imposing tributes just like they did in their American colonies. The goal is to pay the government officials, the clergy, and the cost of maintaining their hold on the islands. The big problem is Filipino settlements were scattered, so the Spaniards introduced reduction, gathering Filipino into pueblos or town, with land to till, which made tax collection easier. Those pueblos were then managed by encomenderos who got reward from the crown. Some were exempt from tributos, principals, soldiers, official, and even vagrants. Chiefs and Manila-Acapulco trade. Suddenly, Filipinos who only grew enough for their families had to increase production to pay tributes, half in cash, half in crops. This money even financed the Spanish conquest of the rest of the islands. Then, in late 50s, the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade started. Once a year, galleons loaded with Asian goods sailed to Mexico and back. This boosted the Philippine economy and strengthened the Spanish control, but tax collection was still terrible. The colony relied on a subsidy from Spain called Situado Real, sent from Mexico's treasury via the galleons. That stopped when Mexico became independent in 1820. In 1884, the tribute was finally replaced by a poll tax collected through the cedula personnel on identification certificate everyone had to carry, especially when traveling. Unlike the tribute, the cedula was per person. It was progressive, based on income, but in reality, it was heavy burden on the peasant and easy for the wealthy to pay. Still, it worked. Revenue collection skyrocketed and the cedula became the government's main source of income. Even the Chinese community had to pay the discriminatory cedula that cost more than what Filipinos paid.
Taxations of the American. The Americans aimed to build a self-support economy where government funds would come mostly from local tax collection instead of relying on the United States. Retention of Spanish tax system. They kept many parts of the Spanish taxation system used from 1898 to 1930 but made several modifications. This allowed continuity while they made reforms little by little. Suspension of the Spanish revenues. 13 Spanish taxes such as Potamian sales, lottery operations, and minting charge were suspended. This considered unnecessary or not aligned with American policies. The American introduced a new land tax which replaced the urban tax. This applied to both urban and rural lands and became a major source of the government revenue. Early tax collection faced serious problems, including disorganized and unclear land titling, political influence in tax decisions, resistance from wealthy landowners, tax evasion. This problem weakened the effectiveness of the taxation system. The Internal Revenue Law of 1904, which established a more structured and modern tax system. The law introduced 10 types of taxes, including license taxes on alcohol and tobacco, excise taxes, bank taxes, document stamp taxes, cedula or the community tax, insurance taxes, forest product taxes, mining concessions, business or manufacturing taxes, occupational license. These taxes help strengthen the government's financial system by creating stable, predictable income for public services and infrastructures. The problem with cedula rates. The fixed cedula fee caused a drop in revenue. In 1907, the fee was doubled to fund road constructions and the other public works. The industrial tax was difficult to apply because it depended on the profitability of businesses. This made assessment and collection slow and confusing. A quarterly percentage sales tax was introduced to create a regular source of income from business sales. The Underwood-Simmons Tariff Act of 1913 removed export taxes. This benefited trade but caused a significant loss in government revenue. Governor General Harrison pushed for more revenue to address the financial gap. New taxes were added: income tax in 1914, inheritance tax in 1919, national lottery in 1932. But despite multiple reforms and the introduction of new taxes, the government still struggled to collection of enough revenue to fully support these programs.
Taxation during the Commonwealth period. During the Commonwealth period, new measures and laws were introduced to make the tax system appear more fair and equitable. In 1936, income tax rates were increased. A surtax was also added for people earning more than 10,000 pesos. Corporate income taxes were also raised. Other tax changes before World War II. In 1937, the cedula tax was abolished, which looked like a progressive move. However, in 1940, a new tax called the residence tax was required for all citizens aged 18 and above, and also for corporations. Other tax changes before World War II. In 1937, the cedula tax was abolished, which looked like a progressive move. However, in 1940, a new tax called the residence tax was required for all citizens aged 18 and above, and also for corporations. These changes were part of an effort to reform the tax structure during that time. National Internal Revenue Code reforms. In 1939, the Commonwealth government drafted the National Internal Revenue Code or NIRC. These introduced major changes. First, the normal tax and surtax on income were replaced by one progressive tax. Personal exemptions were reduced. Corporation income tax slightly increased. Taxes on inheritance and donated gifts were introduced. The cumulative sales tax was replaced by a 10% turnover tax on luxuries. Taxes on liquor, cigarettes, forestry products, and mining were increased. And finally, dividends became taxable. Problems of the tax system. Although the new tax structure improved parts of the American system, it still remained inequitable. The lower class continued to bear most of the tax burden. Meanwhile, the upper class, especially those in political power or the landed elite, were able to benefit more from the system. The agriculture sector was taxed too little, so it did not encourage industrial investments or economic growth. Taxation during the Japanese occupation. When World War II reaches the Philippines, economic activity slowed down drastically. The Japanese took over administration. They continued using the Commonwealth tax system, but they exempted goods that were meant for the Japanese armed forces. Foreign trade fell and taxes mostly came from amusements, manufacturing, professions, and business licenses. Additional funds came from selling government bonds, such as those by the National Sweepstakes. The Japanese government spent heavily on the war and issued military notes to cover the costs.